So here's the start of the installation video for the 5405 and 5605. So these are the most slimline brackets within the Vogel's range. Perhaps the really astute people would be able to pick up the slight mistake within this installation video. So I understand that people want the TV to stay really close to the wall, but then you've got also the challenge of cables. So how do you fit the cables there? How do you access inputs? And how do you get the TV on and off the wall? And for that reason, in general, slimline brackets are not probably my preferred option. So I'm always sampling these slimline brackets, and here's one that I was trying out last week. And you've got a whole bunch of installation points, a wide VESA and all of that, but they just don't feel very stable. You can sort of see how the TV could potentially move about, and then the safety mechanisms just don't look great. I also tried out that no gap one from One for All, so an earlier video, and it just didn't mount all that flat. It didn't have many points to secure it, and even things like the bolts were the wrong size for many of the TVs. But if anyone can get a slimline bracket right, it should be Vogel's. So let's check it out. So this one's the TVM5605 with the 6 meaning maximum VESA 600 wide, and you have its little brother, which is otherwise the same, but its wall plate supports 400 width. So it's called a 5405. So I mark out the drill points. To make it a little more fun, I'm only going to use one metal stud in the center. So I'm fastening the hollow wall anchors, and I attach 3 different points, as you can see here. The 2 screws on the outside are just going into plaster, and here we just fix on the front cover. I had to attach spacers because we've got some bolts that go through the TV testing board, and here we see the auto click lock feature. So you hear the click and then you can release the TV. So we've loaded up with weight. As soon as I put 95 kilos on that one metal stud, I hear a crack and the plaster breaks. It didn't actually fall off the wall, but certainly probably not the safest. So I just wanted to make a point that as a bracket or TV gets closer to the wall, there's less leverage exerted on the wall, so you can actually get away with more weight on a given wall. The second point is that the bracket was actually perfectly fine, so I continued testing. So that's a good feature of slimline brackets, but one challenge is how to get them on and off the wall. If there's too much area above the top VESA hole, then you can't generate the angle to unclip the TV. So improvising, I found that anything below 360 mil above the top VESA point should be okay. So if we check out the same LG, the 75-inch QNED 86, that one has a VESA of 400 by 300, and measuring it up to the point where it slopes away, we get about 250 mil. But removing the spacers, it actually reduces down to 250 mil. So that LG 75 is about the max. So my final thoughts are, it looks great being low profile. It's really easy to attach and remove with the auto click lock. The cable management's nice, and it works with any wall type, including metal studs. For the negatives, I'll just be mindful that Elite full motions are really convenient. You can get easily behind them. You can change angles, all of that. So I kind of prefer the full motion brackets. Also, the other thing, watch out for that space between the top of the VESA and the top of the TV. So if there's too much distance, it won't work, the auto click lock. And the final thing, being low profile, you've just got to be mindful that the installation's a bit harder. So you might need to recess stuff like power points and AV inputs.